Hi, my name is Maria, and I work in the Readers and Reference department, and I'm the Hispanic Resource Coordinator here at the library. And today I'm going to read part 3 for you of The Deal of a Lifetime, and it's written by Frederick Bachman. And we wanted to thank Simon & Schuster for giving us permission to read this book for you today. So I hope you've been following along and enjoying the book, and I'm going to read you the final part of it. So the woman lifted her hand from my hair. She seemed almost ashamed. We're not meant to feel things, but I'm not just my job. I have interests too. I knit. She gestured to her gray sweater. I tried to nod appreciatively because it felt like she expected it. She nodded back with smoke in her eyes. I took the deepest breath of my life. I know you're here to collect me now, and I'm ready to die, I managed, as though it were a prayer. And then she said, the one thing I feared even more, I'm not here for you. Not yet. You'll find out tomorrow that you're healthy and you'll live for a long while yet. You'll have time to achieve whatever you want. I trembled, hugged myself like a child, and sobbed. Then what are you doing here? My job. She patted me gently on the cheek. Then she walked off down the corridor, stopped outside a door, and opened her folder. Slowly pulled out a black pencil and crossed out a name. Then she opened the door to the girl's room. The day before yesterday, I heard the girl and her mother arguing. The girl wanted to make a milk carton dinosaur, but there wasn't time. The girl got angry. The mother cried. The girl stopped then, the corners of her mouth jumping over the despair, leaving her eyes as though it was a skipping rope. She held her mother's hand and said, okay then, but what about a game? They had one where they pretended to talk on the phone. The mother said she had been taken captive by pirates, that she was on her way to their secret island to help the pirates build a flying pirate ship. And in exchange, they would sail her home again. The girl laughed and forced her mother to promise that they would build a milk carton dinosaur then. After that, the girl explained that she was on a spaceship with aliens. Aliens, her mother corrected her. Alienies, the girl corrected. They've got mysterious machines with huge buttons, and they stick wires into my arms, and they have masks over their faces and uniforms that rustle, and you can only see their heads, and they whisper, they're there, they're there, they're there. And then they count down from 10. And when they get to 1, you go to sleep, even though you try not to. The girl fell silent because the mother was crying then, even though it was just a game. So the girl whispered, the alienies will save me, Mommy. They're the best. And there's the photo. The mother tried not to kiss her a million times. The nurses came and lifted the girl onto the rolling bed to take her to the operating theater. They passed mysterious machines with huge buttons. The girl had wires stuck to her arms, and the alienies wore uniforms which rustled and masks over their faces. And when they leaned over the edge of the bed, all she could see was their heads. They whispered, they're there, they're there, they're there. and then counted down from 10. And when they got to 1, the girl fell asleep, even though she tried not to. It's bloody awful to admit to yourself that you're not the kind of person you've always thought you were. All you normal people would have tried to save the child if you could, wouldn't you? Of course you would. So when the woman with the gray sweater opened the door to the girl's room, part of me cracked, because it turns out that I'm more normal than I thought. I shoved the woman, grabbed the folder, and then I ran, as though I were one of you. My car was parked outside the hospital. The brake lights never came on. The wheels grappled for something to cling onto in the snow. I drove down Bergleiden toward town and then took Strandvegan north toward the sea. The most beautiful stretch in the world. I thundered between the trees of Sofiero Castle towards the terraced houses in Lorad and didn't slow down before I reached the 111. There, on the slip road to the bigger road, I stopped and turned off the headlights. As the lorry approached, I drove straight out. I don't remember the crash, just the pain in my ears and the light which washed over me as the steel crumpled like foil and the blood everywhere. The woman dragged both me and the folder out of the wreck. When I shouted, "I can give you someone else to kill," she realized that I meant myself. But it made no difference. She couldn't take a death for a death, only a life for a life. I lay there on the ground with all of Helsingborg's winds beneath my clothes, and she patiently explained, "It's not enough for you to die. To make room for the girl's entire life, another life has to cease to exist. I have to delete its contents, so if you give your life, it'll disappear. You won't die. You'll have never existed. No one will remember you. You were never here." A life for life. That's what it means. That was why she brought me to you. She had to show me what I was giving up. An hour ago, we were standing in Hammontorget, watching you clean the bar through the window. "You never get your child's attention," your mother once said. "The time when they don't just listen to you to be nice, that time passes. It's the first thing to go." The woman stood beside me and pointed at you. "If you give your life for the girl at the hospital, you'll never have been his." I blinked, out of step. "If I die?" "You won't die," she corrected me. "You'll be erased." "But if I don't, if I've never..." She wearily shook her head at my lack of understanding. "Your son will still exist, but he'll have a different father. Everything you'll leave behind will still exist, but it'll have been built by someone else. Your footprints will vanish. You'll have never existed. You humans always think you're ready to give your lives, but only until you understand what that really involves. You're obsessed with your legacy, aren't you? You can't bear to die and be forgotten." I didn't answer for quite some time. I thought about whether you could have done it, given your life for someone else. You probably would, because you're your mother's son, and she's already given a life, the one she could have lived if she hadn't lived for you and me. I turned to the woman. I've sat here watching him every evening since I got sick. She nodded. I know. I knew that she knew. I'd understood that much by now. Every night I wondered whether it was possible to change a person. What did you conclude? That we are who we are. She started walking straight toward you then. I panicked. Where are you going? I shouted. I need to be sure that you're sure, she replied, crossing the car park and knocking on the door of Vinyl Baron. I ran after her and hissed, Can he see us? I don't know what I was expecting. The woman turned to me, mockingly raised one eyebrow, and replied, I'm not a bloody ghost. Of course he can see us. When you opened the door, she muttered, I need a beer. Without paying any attention, as you patiently, like your mother would have done, tried to explain that unfortunately the bar was closed. Then you saw me. And I think both of our worlds probably came to a standstill right then. You didn't say anything about my ripped suit or the blood on my face. You'd seen me in a worse state before. The woman in the gray sweater ate smorgasbord and drank 3 beers in a row, and I asked for a coffee. I saw how happy that made you. We paid very little because there was too much I wanted to say. That's always when we fall silent. You wiped the bar and sorted the glasses, and I thought about the love in your hands. You've always touched the things you like as though they had a pulse. You cared about that bar. You adored this town, the people and the buildings, and the night as it approached over the sound, even the wind and the useless soccer team. This has always been your town, in a way it ever was for me. You never tried to find a life. You were in the right place from the start. I told the woman in the gray sweater what you had told me, that they had moved the entire Tivoli building right across the square. That's what fathers do. They sit in front of their sons and tell their sons stories to a third person, rather than letting them speak for themselves. The woman looked at me for intervals, which were far too short between blinks. You don't care? I asked. I really don't, she replied. And you laughed then, loudly. It made me sing inside. I asked questions, you answered. You told me that you had designed everything in the bar with respect to the building's history. It showed. I should have told you that, not for your sake, because you wouldn't remember any of this, but for mine. I should have told you I was proud. You cleared everything and I followed you, awkwardly clutching my coffee cup. You turned around to take it and our hands briefly overlapped. I felt your heartbeat right in the ends of your fingertips. You glanced at the woman in the bar, and she was reading the cocktail menu and had paused on one containing gin, lime, pasties, and triple sec. Its name was Corpse Reviver number 3. She laughed at that, and then you laughed too, though you found it funny for completely different reasons. I'm glad you've met someone who's, your age, you said quietly to me. I didn't know what to reply, so I didn't. You smiled and kissed me on the cheek. Merry Christmas, Dad. My heart fell to the floor, and you walked through the door into the kitchen. I couldn't bring myself to let you come back. A second is always a second. That's the one definitive value we have on earth. Everyone is always negotiating all of the time. You're doing the deal of your life every day. This was mine. The woman drank the last of her beer, picked up the folder from the bar. We went to the outdoor seating area. There's fierce competition for the most beautiful view in Helsingborg, but that particular place is so calm and confident. It doesn't need to show off. It knows its own beauty. The waves rolling in, the ferries anchored in the harbor, Denmark waiting on the other side of the water. How does this work? I asked. We jump inwards, the woman replied. Does it hurt? I asked. She nodded sadly. I'm scared, I admitted, but she shook her head. You're not scared. You're just grieving. No one tells you humans that your sorrows feel like fear. What are we grieving? Time. I nodded toward the windows in the bar and whispered, will he remember anything? She shook her head. Sometimes for a second, he might feel like there's something missing, but then she clicked her fingers. And the girl, she'll live her life. Will you keep watch over them? The woman nodded slowly. I've never liked the rules anyway. I buttoned my jacket. The wind was blowing at an angle from below. Is it cold where we're going? I asked. But the woman didn't reply. She just handed me a pair of knitted gloves. They were gray, but there was a single thin red thread hanging from one of them. She pulled a small pair of scissors from one of her pockets and carefully cut it away. Then she held my hands as we jumped inwards. You'll never read this. You've never sat waiting on the steps outside your mother's home, and I've never wasted your time. And as we jumped inwards, the woman with the folder and I saw Helsingborg as you've always seen it. For the briefest of moments, like the silhouette of something you recognize, a home. It was our town then, finally, yours and mine. And that was good enough. You'll wake up soon. It's Christmas Eve morning, and I loved you. And that was The Deal of a Lifetime by Fredrik Backman. So thank you for joining us today. And I hope you were able to enjoy the stories. If you missed the other parts, you can see the other videos, part 1 and part 2. Have a great day. Thanks.